how's everybody doing today? Yeah, that's good energy for the end of the day. This is the last talk. I promise if we get through it together, we can go to happy hour and move on with our days. So let's stay up with the energy, though. I promise I'm also going to ask questions during this talk, so just stay loud, okay? Yeah. So I'm Allison Kopf. I'm the founder and CEO of Agrilyst. Agrilyst is a farm management platform for indoor farms. So think greenhouses, vertically stacked farms, anything where you're controlling the environment. And I am so excited to be here today, not only because Puerto Rico is one of my favorite places to visit, being a New Yorker, it just feels right, but also because Puerto Rico is ripe for agricultural opportunity. And so I'm excited that all of you decided to spend your Saturday of Memorial Day weekend here all day to learn and collaborate on how we can bring technology and innovations in agriculture here to Puerto Rico. I want to let you know that before I end, I'll leave about 10 minutes, 15 minutes for questions. So save your thoughts, save your questions so that we can make it interactive. It'll be more fun, I promise. Let's talk about Puerto Rico, things that we do know. Agriculture here represents 1% of the GDP. 80% of the food that's eaten here on the island is imported from the mainland and from other countries. If Puerto Rico was cut off from its food supply, it's estimated that there's only enough food to feed its population for 1 month. I'll say that again. If Puerto Rico was cut off from its food supply today, it's estimated that there's only enough food to feed its population for 1 month. Are you worried? Feels like a crisis to me, so good. I'm glad. So how did we get here? For decades, the agricultural economy here in Puerto Rico has been on the decline. Since World War II, you had sugar prices plummeting and sugar being the lifeblood of the agricultural economy here. That's devastating. And so the number of farms and the percentage of farmland that was being farmed declined. And the number of jobs in agriculture has been on the steep decline since then. And it's been only now a small percentage of the economy that is focused on agriculture. So we've got some major challenges to overcome. Food insecurity, declining jobs and job quality, economic instability. We're all here, though, because we don't see this as the end of the road. We see this as an opportunity for overcoming these challenges if we collaborate and bring the most innovative technological, the most experienced farmers, investment, and intelligent solutions together. I'd love to get an idea of who's here today. Can you raise your hand if you're a farmer, own a farm, have farmed ever, consider yourself a farmer? Okay. Raise your hand if you'd like to get into farming. You want to be a farmer, you want to open a farm, you want to invest in farming, you want to bring agricultural technology. Okay, most of the room. That's a good sign. Here's the interactive part, guys. Why are you not farming yet? What's stopping you from getting into farming? Just shout out some answers. Come on. Capital, money, yes. What else? Knowledge, great. Cost, knowledge. What else? Time, awesome. Manpower, great answers. Great answers. So let's talk about agricultural innovation. The title of my talk today is called Software is Feeding the World. Who's heard the phrase software is eating the world? Mark Andreessen coined it in 2011. Since then, it's been used for every single startup that's come into the space that's doing something innovative. Data is eating the world. Infrastructure is eating the world. Hardware is eating the world. The internet is eating the world. Here's the problem. We all need to eat. The world needs to eat. So we need to feed the world. So we need to talk about how we're going to do that. How are we going to change the paradigm and actually feed the world? I want to tell a different story. One where farmers are using software to plan what crops to grow and when. Where farmers are learning from their patterns and are proactively managing risk in a way they've never done before. Where farms are resource efficient and provide returns to both the farmer and to investors. I want to share this story in hopes that more and more farmers begin to use tools to make more profitable businesses and feed their communities. And so more of you who said that capital and knowledge and manpower and time are the issues that are stopping you from farming can farm today. One where software is used to help feed the world. Here's my story. 5 years ago, I joined a small startup in New York City that was founded on the belief that people on the East Coast of the United States suffer because of long produce journeys from California to the East Coast. My lettuce in New York City, if I go to a grocery store right now and buy lettuce in New York City, it primarily comes from Salinas, California and Yuma, Arizona in the wintertime. It takes about a week to get to me, and by the time it gets to me, there's only a few days left in that life cycle, which contributes to massive other problems, right? We've got food waste problems, we've got food insecurity problems, but if my produce gets to me and only has 2 days left, I can almost guarantee that me, a family of one, is not gonna eat all my lettuce in one day. Just saying, and I eat healthy, I promise. And so we've got these challenges, and to top it all off, these farms take a lot of land and water to grow the food. The company I joined saw this as an opportunity to build hydroponic greenhouses closer to the point of consumption. Because hydroponic farming is more land and water efficient, we were producing more sustainable food. We were growing close to cities and selling to local farmers markets and supermarkets. It's a great system. And because in indoor farming, you're essentially creating an artificial environment, it should be as simple as controlling your inputs that determines what you get out of it. We all know that it's not that simple. You're controlling multiple biological systems at play. You've got low profit margins, and you have to manage labor efficiently. Farming is hard. That's why software is so important. I left in 2015 to build a software platform that would allow indoor farmers to take control of their operations, to control better what goes into their farm in order to control what comes out of that farm. So let's pretend we all own a greenhouse farm. It's not that easy to build greenhouses in general, but here in Puerto Rico, especially difficult. It's hot, it's humid. I woke up this morning and the window in my hotel room was completely fogged over. Anybody else? No, it was a humid morning. It was a humid morning for me. It's been like winter in New York. And so you can imagine that if that's what my window is doing just from the environment, the glass box that is a greenhouse is incredibly difficult to control. And so you need incredibly great ventilation, you need air circulation to mitigate the high temperatures and control humidity, which means huge investments in equipment and in structures up front, and huge investments in control systems to actually manage what's going on. And even with great infrastructure investment, humidity must be managed closely on a real-time basis. With low humidity, plants can't take up the water as fast as they're transpiring, and you lead to things like leaf burn. With high humidity, plants are incredibly susceptible to diseases, to glassiness, to fungal diseases, to tip burn, to blossom end rot. None of those are good. They all kill your crops. It's not fun. Most of these issues, though, can be controlled and even reversed with proper climate control. By increasing airflow and adding heat, you can lower the humidity and actually decrease the glassiness in plants. But first, you have to be aware and active about the real-time control of the farm, not only for plant health and for quality, but also for your profitability, for your bottom line. For diseases that can't be reversed, your revenues can be completely devastated. Has anyone tried to grow spinach before? No? Nobody? Good, don't, it's hard. But growing spinach in hydroponic systems is incredibly challenging, especially in climates like Puerto Rico, where it's very humid, because you need incredibly cold water to grow. And so you have to make sure that it stays incredibly cold the whole life cycle. And if not, it's really susceptible to a disease called Pythium. And the challenge with that is that you don't notice Pythium until it gets to the end of its life cycle. And by then it's too late, you've already infected your whole crop. And you can't replant spinach in a pond that has had Pythium until you've completely sanitized the system. So within the span of a day, you can lose tens of thousands of dollars in revenue just because you weren't able to control down to the degree of your pond temperature. It's really, really challenging to do. This is the sort of stuff that we look at our company, at Agrilyst. So let's take a look at the platform. Here you'll see our dashboard. It's the first thing you see when you log into a system. The idea is that it's clean, it's streamlined, it's simple. It's presenting to you all of the information that's related to your operations, from a real-time financial performance snapshot to your to-do list for the day, to climate information, to yield information. And I want to spend just a little time here, because we were just talking about climate information. The first graph that you'll see up top is an example of displaying climate information for your facility. We work with farmers to understand what sort of sensors they might have in the facility and then speak to those sensors to pull that information in real time. One of the big challenges in commercial climate control systems is that they often have incredibly difficult to understand graphs. And graphs should be really simple. They should be something that tells a story to me, the user. And it makes it really hard to understand what's going on and to change your behavior on that information. We want to make that process simple. And so the first step in making that simple, as I said, was to create graphs that are easy to read and understand, and then we tie that information into specific crops, which I'll show in a minute. And we run analytics on that climate information and on how crops are performing at any given time to learn what works well for those crops specifically. So you can make decisions not just based on your gut intuition or what you're used to doing, but instead on what's best specifically for each and every crop. Because you can imagine what's best for our imaginary greenhouse that we have in Puerto Rico right now is going to be very different than what's great for a vertical stacked farm in Kansas City, Missouri. And so you want to try and understand, again, what's optimal for you and always stay at that optimal level. Perhaps the most important thing that we look at in our platform is plant yield. We want to understand exactly how your plants are performing quantitatively so that you can choose which varietals to plant in order to meet both your customer needs and your revenue goals. And the first step in getting to easy management of those crops and getting that information and yield information is through managing your crops. And so we allow growers to set up, actually probably the most important thing that we do in general as a software company is include flexibility and allow growers to set up the system digitally as they do in physical space. And so what does that mean? That means you create zones based on what you call zones. You create zones based on what's happening in your production levels. If I'm a greenhouse grower and I have 10 ponds out in my facility and my plants go into germination for 3 days and then into production, I may have 2 zones. But if I have 70 stacks of farming equipment and I have 30 levels in each of those stacks, I may have a whole lot more zones included in my grid system. And whatever I call them is what I should be able to call them in the system, not what somebody else is telling me to call them. And so including that flexibility and speaking the lingo of growers is incredibly important to us, and it's the first step in setting up your system. The second is creating crop templates. So what used to be done really manually and using pen and paper to record what I'm planting, how long is it going in my facility, what are the life stages of each crop, when is it going to be harvested, and what's the eventual yield, I'd write that information down every single day. Everybody who raised your hand who has farmed or is farming should know this, that there's a lot of pen and paper. And so what we try and do is automate the data collection process as much as possible, turn data collection into a tool rather than a burden. And so you create templates. If I know that I'm going to plant lettuce, for example, every single day, I can set that frequency up once and not touch it again. And so every time that I physically seed something in real space, it should be in my system already, and then it should start to track data along with it as it moves through space in physical reality. And so that's the thing that's really important, is trying to take away the time that it takes to actually collect data and provide it back as insights in a tool as opposed to something that I'm just doing to store that information. The next step in that is creating these cards. And when you have a card in the system, it means that that crop is in the system physically, and it'll begin to tag information that happens to it during its life cycle. So the climate information for specific crops and understanding what climatic conditions it's going through at any given time. If you're measuring things like nutrient density or plant physiologically through plant tissue analysis, you can store that information here so that the system can begin to start tracking your historical performance. And having all of that crop information in one place helps, again, get you to planning for optimization as opposed to just trying to stay above water with management. Optimizing workflow goes beyond just managing your crops, though. So we built a simple task manager to link up crop activities with other farm activities all together. You can now create tasks. Aside from the ones that are provided automatically, you can create new tasks. You can assign them to employees. You can begin to plan labor more effectively. which is hugely important to your bottom line. We already mentioned it today as one of the big things that's preventing people from farming. So if we can solve that, we're trying. Another thing that's incredibly important in farms is maintaining a chain of command of things coming into your facility. So again, for staying above regulatory compliance and food safety certifications, also something as simple logistically as knowing when to reorder your supplies. Having a smart system that you store all that data in one place is a good thing. Our system also looks at other processes like food safety certification in more detail and things like integrated pest management, again, with the goal of making them more simple. For food safety certification, the process of getting certified is incredibly archaic and pretty difficult, actually. Most growers have a binder with information in it that contains logs and checklists and storage information and processes and all of your plan procedures. And growers generally get to them if they get to them, when they get to them type of a thing. I don't know if anybody's ever been affected by a foodborne illness. Side anecdote, I had E. coli in college. It's not fun. Don't do it if you can avoid it. I will say that it is terrible, and also food is the thing that sustains us and we live off it. The idea that food can also hurt us and kill us, it just sucks. And to have a proactive system to help you become certified easier was something that was incredibly personally important to me, just having been through something like that. And so taking it sort of the burden again out of the grower's hands and building it into an automatic system where the system builds your food safety plan for you based on your operations and then feeds those work logs into your workflow, into your tasks automatically. So you're not thinking about it as an extra thing you have to do. Instead, when it's time to get audited, you have all the information directly at your fingertips and you can just print it off. So there's nothing that you have to do. You don't have to go to a binder. You don't have to check off checklists. You don't have to go into additional logs. Everything is just composed with part of your normal everyday processes. For integrated pest management, farms, another process that's really, really manual, labor intensive, and also not really quantitatively repeatable. For farmers who don't want to use pesticides in their farms, one of the options is integrated pest management, the idea that you can use good bugs to kill bad bugs. And so has anybody ever had sticky traps for flies in their house? Yeah? Cool. One person, which is great. You and I are kindred spirits. Apparently everybody else has beautiful bugless houses and I'm moving in. Well, growers will take these same sticky traps, imagine, hundreds of them, put them out into their facility, and then they'll send someone manually to go record the number of bugs on each of the traps. Not fun, right? Then I take that information, I come back to my office, and I look up if I've met the threshold for bad bugs. If I have, I look up the next plan for the good bug plan, and I release those good bugs, and then I go do it again. And I keep doing this because that's how I track what's going on. Not only does that suck for everyone involved, it is also a process that really lends itself towards software. So imagine having your phone and going out and using that as the counter, and real time in the field, you can see if you've met threshold levels, and you can have the plan for your beneficial release right there. But also going a step beyond that, because you have historical data now in the system, the software can start to pick up on trends. So if I know that my pests are coming in seasonally, it can pick that up. If I know that certain bugs have shorter life cycles than the crop life cycle, so you may never see that bug. But if I'm getting to the winter season and my day length is getting shorter, I may increase my crop cycle a few days. If that happens, now I may get a whole new crop of bugs coming in that I have to deal with, which, again, I may not have picked up on if I'm not seeing the historical data and the trends. And so creating this optimal environment for your plants is really, really important. So is managing your bottom line for your profitability, right? Everybody's talking about cost, everybody's talking about affordability, profit margins. How do we stay in business longer? Because it's all moot if we can't operate profitably, right? So we're in Puerto Rico, let's talk about energy. Electricity here is hugely expensive. I've learned and heard more about that today than I think anything else. And if there's one takeaway I'm walking away with, energy is too expensive. So someone like me who's coming in and advocating for indoor farming and who really sees greenhouse farming and vertical farming as part of the solution to Puerto Rico's food security must seem crazy. Sure, greenhouses can be operated with little energy if you manage your climate really, really well, since you might not need supplemental lighting. But what about a vertical farm? An indoor warehouse farm where you're basing your operations entirely off the premise that you're going to be running your operation 24/7 on lights. That seems crazy, right? But these are all things that we need to be talking about. We need to talk about them. I believe there's a combination of infrastructure and operational management that can work for these types of farms and can be profitable here in Puerto Rico. I believe that adding solar panels, for instance, is really important. I believe that feeding your energy demand into software systems where you can begin to look at how and when you're using that electricity and then cut down on that demand is hugely important. We're working with a grower who grows cucumbers in a greenhouse who was able to cut his electricity by $150 a day because he wasn't taking advantage of peak or off-peak energy pricing, which was available to him in his area. Not the case everywhere, but something to look at. And he was running his lights based on just what he thought plants needed, not based on schemas that worked for profitability standpoint. So I understand that my plants need a certain amount of light. That's great. But I can actually offset that with things like CO2 or with different temperature controls. And so if I can do that and start to run real-time analytics and schemas to see what makes the most sense, not only from a plant optimization standpoint, but from a profitability standpoint, then that's where software becomes exciting and interesting and where software really becomes helpful. And so here's where I get really excited. This might just be because I'm a data nerd. I'll tell you that ahead of time. But managing your workflow, which is mostly what I've been talking about so far, is really just the first step. The more important step is how we use that data stored in the system. And each and every step of production has data associated with it. So what does that data look like? Your climate, we've been talking a lot about climate. Climate has data, light levels, temperature, humidity, CO2, pH, water temperature, everything that's climatic. Your crops have data, plant yield, texture, leaf to stem ratio, Brix levels for sweetness and things like tomatoes, crop loss from stage to stage, plant waste, looking at everything associated with the crops. And then you plan production based on that information. What I plant and when and how and where it goes in my system should be based on data. It should be based on this information. If I know, for instance, that my lettuce crops are starting to have smaller leaf size and larger stems, I can take a guess that my seeding density might be too much because the plants are struggling to breathe, and so they're stretching up and trying to get light and oxygen into their system, and so you start to see a contraction of leaf size. It also might be that my growth cycle is too short. I might need to just leave my plants out for an extra day or two. But those are things that are right now being made off gut intuition, not off of the data. And so what we want to help do is use this information to make it more quantitative and take the guesswork out. One of the interesting things that we're doing right now and working on, my personal favorite thing that we're working on, is building what we call our grower knowledge base. It's based off of R&D in the industry, industry standards, academic research. We're working a lot with Cornell University. And couple all of this information, this outside information, with the information in the system collected from the farms to come up with real-time recommendations like this, so that you're always ahead of the things that are coming up. So today's a good example. It's overcast. It's going to be overcast for the next few days, apparently. I'm hoping that that changes so I can go to the beach, but we'll see. But this system is actually, this is pulled from a different system that happens to be in an overcast situation right now. But if the system starts to pick up ahead of time that it's going to be overcast, it will push recommendations back to me to drop temperatures for certain crops, because if I can reduce my day-night temperatures, I can start to mitigate potential risks of disease in my crops. And you know, if tomatoes specifically, this is a tomato plant farm, but the idea is that if it's 3 or more days of overcast, my tomatoes are in really serious threat of being prone to disease. And so if I can do climatic control measures to reduce that risk, that's a good thing. And that recommendation is based off the knowledge that's, again, in the system, coupled with industry standards and academic research in the knowledge base. But that's just the beginning. Imagine growing food based on desired flavor profile, or for texture, or for color, or for specific health benefits. In Japan, there's a lot of farmers growing lettuce right now with no potassium for people with kidney problems. And so the idea that you can actually specifically deliver the nutrients to plants so that they can be grown in a way that everyone can eat them, or for people who can't actually eat certain crops to be able to eat them, to change nutrient density so that people who are allergic to specific crops can have access to them. That's exciting, right? That's all based on data. We need to build this knowledge base of information so that we can begin to grow crops that are more optimal. And then the second thing, and that's coming soon, the second thing is that we need to not only get farmers to be operating at optimal performance, but to push the boundaries of how we define optimal. So what's optimal today, I'm going to guarantee, is not what is optimal. And we need to understand that and how we define optimal and optimization. And we push those boundaries to get to more profitability and better quality and better healthy food. And then turn farms into a class of assets that's now predictable and financeable. Again, the big thing people mentioned a lot is finance and raising the capital to build these farms. If they're predictable, they're financeable. And we need to get farms to that point where we know and eliminate this information gap and build farms that we know what's going on and control that so that we can turn them into a good, profitable class of assets. We're also headed toward more crops. We're adding crops to the platform. We're launching our cannabis platform this summer. We're also working with flower producers to build our flower production platform. And we're also working with some pharmaceutical producers who are doing things like growing tobacco strains that generate the biologicals for the influenza vaccine as well as the AIDS vaccine. So a lot of crops are moving indoors because of the ability to control what's going on. We're excited about that. At the beginning of my talk, I spoke about the things that we should be concerned about, primarily food insecurity. By being here today, I think that we really are all taking the first step toward ensuring that not only Puerto Rico, but everywhere becomes food secure and that agriculture becomes a staple of our local economy. You talked about some of the reasons that you're not farming yet: technology, cost, information, workforce, and time. We can close this gap. We can close this gap by working together to solve these challenges. This morning, I spoke with several of you. I can see some of you physically right now at the mentor booth. And you told me about some of the businesses that you're going to create. And it's exciting. This is really an exciting time. My advice to all of you and my call to action today would be to go out there and do it. Ask for advice, build a mentorship network, and create the businesses that are solving the problems today so that we can all thrive in the future. I think it's incredibly important that we have this conference. I want to thank not only all of you before I turn this off, but also I'm the last speaker, so I think I get to do this. But thanks to everybody here in this conference who organized and worked on this conference. It's been a great day, so just maybe a round of applause for the conference organizers. And so with that, thank you guys. I look forward to continuing the conversations, and I will take questions.
Preguntas, ¿hay alguna pregunta? Preguntas por aquí para Allison. Necesito uno de los micrófonos por aquí. No se vayan todavía, que hay una sorpresa ya mismo. Ajá.
Hi, my name is Francisco Robles, and I have a question regarding the data collection, data entry, actually, I should say, of this. So you're saying in the macro ecosystem, right, of a system here, do you guys have a sensors collecting the information? You didn't talk about that, so how's that done? I mean, there's a lot of manual entry, I guess, but how is that backed up with something that's not as labor intensive?
Sure. That's a great question. So the question was around data collection, how we do that, specifically mentioning that there's things like sensors that can collect data, how we work with those sensors, but then also how we sort of reduce a lot of the manual entry that comes along with data collection processes. So if you think about the categories of things that collect data, in an indoor farm specifically, generally you have sensors that are things like climate control. Most often those are tied to a climate system, a climate control system. Then you have handheld sensors with the option to do things like pH and water and things that aren't necessarily connected to a control system. You have static data, which is things like PDF reports when you send plant tissue analysis out to labs, or you get things from a third-party research and things along those lines. And then you have manual data collection, so things that I'm typically writing down or storing somewhere else. I'm storing in Excel, I'm storing in a notebook, I'm storing anywhere you want to store it, but I'm writing it down in some regard. And so we approach each of these a little bit differently. For things that I'll start at the other end, so things that are manually collected now, we try and automate that data collection process as much as humanly possible. So I mentioned crop templates and the idea that if I understand the frequency of when I'm planting things, that can all be automated. And so instead of having to write that information down daily, I can set up templates that recur in my system. Then there's other components that are things like integrated pest management. Right now where we're at is you'll enter into a counter on your phone or your mobile device a number, but then in the future where we'd like to get to, and again, this is all coming back to if you can automate it, you should. And so we'd love to get to a point where you take a picture of a counter and it's automatically in the system, right? And so there's a lot of things along those lines where from a manual data collection process, you try and automate it as much as possible using technology. Not only from a data company's perspective of eliminating human error, but also it's just a major time component for the day. On the hardware side, so there's two different pieces here. One is sort of non-connected, non-internet enabled sensors, typical old school sensors that have a reading and you have to read them. Those have to be manually entered for now, just because there's not a physical way to connect them to the internet yet. A lot of companies in the hardware space and the IoT space, the Internet of Things space, are working on this technology, so we're excited to work with companies like that. On the connected side of things, one of the big challenges in commercial sensor equipment is that the equipment for this, or the technology for this has been around for a really long time, has not really evolved very much. And so you've got really, you've got really clunky control systems that are locally, the data stores locally on a computer that's essentially a Windows 94. None of that's great for an internet company, but we work directly with those sensor companies to build an API for automatic data collection. So we're working with almost every one of the large companies to do that. For companies that can't do that yet, for any reason, we're working with other IoT companies to build hardware to get in there, but we're not in the business of creating hardware, so it's more about building the software that speaks directly to sensors.
Another question? ¿Alguna otra pregunta para Alison? ¿Por aquí? ¿Por aquí? ¿No? Carlos?
I told everyone to have questions.
I think drinks are waiting for us.
Drinks are waiting.
Bueno, un aplauso para Alison.